Hi, friends, and welcome to the Voices of MCC podcast. I'm Pastor Todd here with Aiden Trimble, thinking about the way that the beliefs of MCC and practices of our church fellowship are worked out in the lives of the members of our church. And happy to have Aiden along today to think about the last year and kind of a health challenge a year ago and a kind of a health saga that had resulted for several months. And now we look back maybe 367 or 8 days, 368 days ago was a big event for the Trimble family and for Aiden and for our church family in many ways. And I spoke with Aiden several months ago about let's get together at some point here and reflect on what God has done so that we can share that with folks at church. And I believe it would be an encouragement to them. So, Aiden, thanks for opening your life. Your faithfulness is encouragement to us always, but I think this conversation is going to add to that even further. Let's begin for folks who don't know you as well. Tell us about your connection with MCC, current ministries you're involved in.
Well, I started coming to MCC, I think 5 years ago now. The anniversary was just last month. So I came as a freshman in college, originally from the connection of Phil Parker, who was a basketball coach at Spurgeon. He recruited me to play basketball there. And then I came and checked out MCC on my recruiting visit, as it was a Sunday. And I liked it. So then I came back for school when school started and basically cold joined the church, going cold turkey to get the SBC tuition discount. And the elders were very gracious to let me in just off of a couple of conversations we had. So, basically when I joined, it was like, well, I didn't even really know if I wanted to go to church still or if I was just going to fudge it, being 7 hours away from my folks. But I was like, well, I joined this church, so now I kind of have to. It turned out to be really great, and I got involved with the church and just building relationships. So 5 years later, I'm still here. I brought my wife 2 years ago now when we were still dating, and we got engaged, had our marriage counseling at the church, and now we're having a daughter to bring into the church as well. So as far as ministries, I help with the tech team, slides and sound and video, and I'm the church treasurer, which is my main job. So running the bank accounts, paying the bills, counting the offering, all that kind of stuff is up my alley. I think that's about covers it. Oh, we help with nursery and stuff like that, and show up to as many men's meetings as I can, and just try to be there with the guys. So,
yes, and it's fun to have you there and and to be with you. Thankful for your service in so many ways. Just a servant's heart, and like so many folks in our church, looking out for one another, going the extra mile, and getting encouragement too. I know that when we're together, we're sharpening each other, and just so grateful for the Lord bringing you. I do recall that membership interview with your mom. She had dropped you off, I think, at school, and we hung out and did the interview on a Saturday morning when you had moved in the day before. And the Nebraska connection has been rich and fun, and along
absolutely.
the way, your faithfulness. So let's go back. September 5th, 2023, Wednesday, September 5, 2023. Walk us through the day a little bit.
Well, I'll start with a little background. I played basketball for 3 years at Spurgeon College before I graduated and got married. I just quit a year early because a wife is better than another year of basketball. So I've always been a pretty active guy. I'm not overweight. I'm pretty in shape and stuff like that. Try to work hard. And for work, I'm a truck driver for a produce company here in Kansas City. So I start at 4 a.m. or thereabouts and drive about 3 hours to anywhere out of town, Lincoln, Omaha, St. Louis, Moberly, Joplin, Wichita, Topeka, anywhere like that, and make my deliveries. And then I come home for the day and I'm done. So a year ago, I was at work like a regular day. It was actually easier than usual. I got home a couple hours early. At the time, my wife was working full-time job as well, since we didn't have any kids. So she wasn't home when I got home. I was a few hours ahead of her. So just kind of relaxed at home and then got ready to head down to a small group at the Alex and Kara Volkman's house that evening. We were going to have a meal. So Mia got home. We grabbed our food, headed down there. Just pretty much a regular day. If anything, it was a good day. So we got there. I was throwing a frisbee around in the backyard with the kids and a couple of the other guys. And I started to feel a little bit lightheaded, kind of like I was dehydrated, which I've felt plenty of times in my life playing sports. So I kind of just started to head towards the house to get a sip of water and sit down because it was almost supper time. So, I kind of just figured low on water, needs to get some food in my stomach and I would be all right. Well, I got halfway across the yard and the whole world starts spinning around me and my vision starts getting all spotty. I feel real dizzy. I'm like, man, I got to sit down right now. So I kind of start to sit down. And at that point, I lost consciousness. And instead of sitting down, I collapsed basically in the middle of the backyard. My eyes were open, but I was unconscious. And my whole body was convulsing or shaking. My hands, my feet, and everything were shaking. And I was unconscious and shaking like that for 7.5 minutes. And this is just in the backyard in front of my wife and all the kids. It was Jeff and Christine Kim's first time at our small group. They had just joined the church, and so they didn't even know who I was, and I was out there just shaking, unconscious on the ground. So it was really scary for everyone, obviously. So they called the ambulance. The ambulance came and picked me up. By the time they got there, I was just gaining consciousness back, and I had no clue what had happened or where I was. It felt like I had been asleep for about 12 hours. And I just woke up and I was like, where am I? What happened? I could remember, I knew who people were. Could remember that Mia was there with me. And I remember Alex and Caleb standing over me. And then the paramedics came. They loaded me up on the stretcher. And I was kind of like, man, this is ridiculous. I don't need to be on a stretcher. But it was probably good that I stayed on it. So they threw me in the ambulance and took me back to the North Kansas City Hospital. And they couldn't really figure out anything that was wrong with me. At the time, we thought that it might have been a seizure, but we took a MRI that night and it showed no problems. It was basically like it had never happened. And so I scheduled several more doctor's appointments. I had a brain scan, a sleep scan, all sorts of these kinds of things to just find out if there's anything wrong with me or what had gone wrong. From that point, and nothing did that they could tell. So I ended up going home from the hospital that night, and which was great. Our apartment was only a mile away from there, and I remember that you came, and that was very encouraging. I think Alex followed the ambulance as well, so that was really great. And for the most part, for me, it was just disorienting and scary a little bit, but really I didn't really know what had happened. So it was kind of like, I don't want to say it was whatever, but I was kind of like, this is kind of bizarre that it happened, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I had to call out from work, obviously. So at the time we thought it was a seizure. I went home and slept that night. I slept for more than 12 hours. So I was just completely exhausted. And so, yeah, to this day, we couldn't figure out anything wrong that had happened. Yeah, it was a long day. I got home and just slept, had several days off of work afterwards. But yeah, very scary incident and definitely had a big effect on my life.
When we look back to that that day and just seeing you there, excuse me, at the hospital that evening, and Mia's there, and you guys are sitting in the ER and just waiting on these results to come back, and we're just sitting there watching Sports Center and
Yep.
trying to think about, well, what does all of this mean? And turns out there's no definitive neurological diagnosis or impediment in any way, just a one-off event.
Yeah.
But since you are employed as a truck driver, one-off events, if the medical team doesn't know that's a one-off event, if there is something, obviously that puts a lot of people at risk on the road.
Absolutely.
And so there were implications. Walk us through what that was like for you professionally, and and kind of the dominoes that began to fall that evening.
Yeah, so I obviously called off work the next day and just had several days off in a row, which I needed. You know, it, my body just basically reset itself, I think is what happened. So I slept a lot. My muscles were super sore from obviously being completely tensed up for so long. Uh, but yeah, so the state laws and I think federal laws as well say that if you are epileptic and have problems with seizures, then you cannot be a commercial driver. You can still drive a private vehicle, but you can't do it for a job. So that was obviously how I made money and provided for my wife. So, this whole thing basically put our livelihood at risk if we could figure out what was wrong. If I was diagnosed with epilepsy or anything like that, I would basically have to get a whole new job and start my whole life over, more or less. So there's a lot of fear that set in, probably was the first thing, and anxiety. I really like to know what I'm going to do at certain times of the day. I love routines and expectations to be the same every day. And so out of the blue, all of that was just gone. I couldn't go to work. I didn't know if I was going to be able to work, if I'd have to find a different job. I was stuck at home at the house by myself, and Mia had to go into work still every day. So that was scary for both of us because she was away at work for 8 hours and I was just home alone. We didn't know if anything was going to happen again. So I ended up not being able to work for 3 weeks while we got original tests and doctor's appointments finished. And I was just keeping in touch with my boss, and he was very gracious. And even though I couldn't drive, they allowed me to come back and work in the office and in the warehouse. It was a significant pay cut from what I was making as a driver. So I would say the first domino was the fear and anxiety of not knowing what to do. I would say the second one was boredom and depression from just being alone in my house all day, unable to work, just wondering what was going on with my body. And yeah, I had some really tough weeks. I would say the last 2 weeks were really tough mentally. And then the third domino would be going back to work, being glad that I was able to work, but also now more fear and anxiety because my pay was a lot less. And my hours were different and all of that. So just like a massive zap of change. Obviously I couldn't drive, so I had to walk to work every day. And that is a big moment of God's providence because our apartment was a mile from my work. So it wasn't a terrible walk every day. It's definitely doable. So Mia would drive me to work in the mornings, and then I would walk home in the afternoons. A couple times I walked in the mornings, but so yeah, then it was just, one of my biggest loves or values was consistency and routine. All of that was just thrown upside down for months, basically. So yeah, I would say that was the mental dominoes. Yeah, it was a
When we
tough
look
time.
when we look back to that, I mean, I remember praying for you, trying to check in throughout the days and just see how things are going. We'd hang out occasionally, but you were still participating at church, still connecting with people, and seeing God provide, seeing Him carry you along. And then when you're able to get back to work and just take what you could and just make ends meet, God provided in that way. And we waited for the exam when you would finally be cleared to drive again. And September 5th until, was it February that you had the clearing exam?
Yeah, that was when I had the first one. Yeah, which is a story in itself. So yeah, so the state laws, if you have a seizure or some sort of uh, episode like that you can't drive anything for 6 months. Can't drive a you can't drive a tricycle down the street, basically. So no driving or anything like that for 6 months. So I had my first doctor's appointment a couple weeks later, and the guy set the date for February, thinking that was 6 months. So that was what I planned for. I told my boss I can drive this, after this day in February. I have this appointment. It's scheduled. It's going to happen. We get there in February, and the doctor kind of checks me out. He's like, yeah, well, you seem pretty healthy. There's all these scans and everything. There's obviously nothing wrong with you. He's like, and he looks at his calendar. He's like, well, I think it's only been 4 months. Or he said it's been 5 months. I was like, no, it's not. It's been 6. You counted 6 the last time we were here. He was like, all right, let me check. He goes, leaves the room, comes back. He's like, yeah, man, I'm sorry. I miscounted the months. So it'll be another month before you can drive. And man, that was just crushing. Uh, Yeah, so kind of had to just be like, all right, dude, thanks. And just kind of went back to the car and had to call my boss and be like, I can't drive for another month now. The doctor just messed up. He made a mistake. And so, you kind of go back and, it just gotten to the point mentally where I was like, all right, like we got through this. It's going to be okay. I'll get back to my driving, back to my pay, back to our life as it was. And then it's just complete reset all over again. So that was the same feeling like, oh my goodness, is it even possible to do this another month? And we did it, and the Lord saw us through. And then we had another appointment, and he was like, yeah, here's your paper saying you're good to go. And it wasn't even 10 minutes being there at the doctor's office. And then came back, they put me on a driving route like the next day. So
they wanted you back.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to be back too. I was going to go insane.
Oh, I can imagine. And just incredible to see how the Lord has carried you along. Let's think about that for a minute. Have there been any particular passages of Scripture for you, maybe you and me together, that have carried you along, impacted you in a fresh way this year?
Yeah, I had a pretty hard time with getting into Scripture, especially when it first happened, just because I was emotionally overwhelmed. And I was really tempted to not be in the Word, which is kind of weird. Being a believer for most of my life, you would think it's the first thing, but it was a battle I had to fight. I was like, man, what do I read? I don't know. There's nothing in the Bible that's like, read this when you think you have a seizure and you can't work anymore. But at those times, it's kind of just go back to Old Faithful. Shoot layups, run the ball, just go to what works. And one of my favorite books of the Bible is Hebrews, just because of the clear, logical explanation of Jesus being the Son of God, being our Savior, perfectly fulfilling the law and things like that. So I really just went back to the book of Hebrews and just read it. And, there was no magical change or anything. It wasn't like I read a verse and then it was like, wow, everything is happy and cheery now. But I think that by staying in church, by staying in the Word as I could, by meeting with our small group who's praying for us every week, encouraging us, there were a lot of verses that stuck out to me. I think the biggest one being Hebrews 4:15 and 16, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in the time of need. And really, that's just what I had to do. I mean, I was sitting at home for 3 weeks with nothing to do but either play video games or talk to the Lord or lose my mind. So it was like, man, I kind of just got to come before the Lord every day and just kind of lay these things out there. And man, even reflecting back on it personally a year ago, just talking out loud to the Lord, I'm like, I don't know why exactly this happened or, what you want me to learn from this, but, I know that the Lord is faithful. I come before the throne of grace. I just lay my concerns out to him, and he might not magic wand fix it for me. But, I've learned to be patient. I've learned to I just have to cast myself on him. There's no part of my life that's not under his control, and certainly no part of my life that can't be taken away instantly. And so, I came before the Lord, before the throne of grace, and just had to ask him for mercy to, let me keep living my life, and growing as a man, providing for my wife, and for the grace to help me in my time of need, because it sure was a time of need. And the Lord is faithful. He saw us through it. We had less money, if you now that money is everything, we had less then than we did ever. We spent all of our savings on my hospital bills, basically. But the Lord provided for us. We always had like exactly what we needed, week by week, month by month. Um, and He's been faithful since. Just even the past year, we've been able to buy a house. We now have our own place, and He's blessed us with a daughter coming in December. So, it's such an insane time of the year, but you look back at it in the big picture, it's like, man, God is so good.
Mm.
And I I really owe nothing of this to myself. What God has done in my life is something that only He could do. And so just have to say thanks, Lord. And I guess my life is so obviously in your hands. So I might as well just surrender myself to your control, and whatever you do with my life, so be it. I mean, God's plan is so much better than mine ever could be anyways. So yeah.
So encouraging. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation. We have talked over the last year of what this would be like, and I wanted folks to be able to hear from you and get this kind of encouragement. There are several important ideas for us to take away from this conversation as a church body and others who might listen. But one of them is the fact that you are 20, how old?
23.
23. So at 22 years old, this happens to you.
Yep.
Often we hear of this kind of a medical event happening to someone who's 73, 72,
Yeah.
not 20 something. And it's a reminder for all of us. It doesn't matter our age. Life is short, and we need to take that seriously. And the Lord, so that's I think the first lesson for all of us here. You're a young man, healthy young man, athletic young man. And this happened, and the Lord allowed it to be a one-time event, and you're healthy, and that's wonderful, and we're all very grateful. Just your fellowship's appreciated, and obviously for all of us to be better, to be with the Lord, but we love one another, so we'll take it as long as we can. But second, you mentioned along the way just the power of the word in this passage, Hebrews 4, approaching the throne of grace that we might receive help at the proper time, and God carrying you along through his word. And that's an important lesson for us as a congregation in challenging times to go to the Lord with his word and seeking him. This reminds us of the big picture of life and what life's about. And finally, you mentioned, your small group and church in general and various mechanisms of support and prayer, and those folks walking with you through this day by day. Alex following the ambulance to the hospital. I remember he didn't leave until I think after I got there that night, and they were constantly checking on you, their love for you over and over again, showing up at various ways. And it's the power of fellowship. It's the power of the local church, that true encouragement and love in the body of Christ. And God works through us in this way, and them carrying you along in some ways. And it's just, it's rich to think about this and to reflect and see how God continues to strengthen us together. We know that there are going to be events like this in the future in our church. This is not the last. And we don't know why it happened. I know for you, that was some of the frustrating. And for all of us, though, there are
Yeah,
things in our life where we
absolutely.
go, why this? You're healthy. You're athletic. You had worked hard that day. There are no problems. Why 6 months off? Why, when you're successfully serving in this vocation and helping this company get fruit to places around the Midwest? Why?
Yeah.
Why, when you're newly married? Why? And we just have to be honest as Christians. We don't always get the answer. That's just what God's providence is. We don't always get the answer. But we do know him more in these times. We see the power of his word. We see the power of the local church, and all these increase our faith as opposed to decreasing it. The lack of an answer does not mean that we lose our faith. It, in fact, can be just the case that it may propel us in our faith, and it certainly gives us cause to grow, at least in our faith, and rely on it. So, Aiden, thanks for your just opening up here, talking about the last year and the challenges, and you've been encouragement to us. Thank you. I do want to thank Alex Volkman for producing these podcasts, and Caleb Sheffield and Adam Anderson for their musical introductions and conclusions. Friends, until we gather again, Lord bless and keep you.